Hi everyone, my name is Gaurav Bahiti. I'm the founder and CEO of Procol. Uh, Welcome to ProcureCast. This is one of our first few episodes with Joel, and I'm excited to introduce him today. Welcome to the podcast, Joel. Thank you for coming on to this, and would love to hear a quick introduction from your end.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Gaurav. It's my pleasure to chat with you today. And quick intro. So I'm the consulting principal at Pure Procurement, which is essentially a solo consulting firm. And I'm also the editor, author, promoter of the Pure Procurement newsletter, which is more is the other part of my business, which is more around ProcureTech education of the market. And I send out a weekly blog post on that around how to think about ProcureTech, how to deploy ProcureTech, how to build the business cases, how to get it working for your business, and ultimately reaching your business objectives, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So technology supporting business processes that are aligned on business objectives, and so that's me in a nutshell, right? That right hand technology man to the CPO.
Yeah, that's how I actually came across your LinkedIn profile for the first time. I got your newsletter and I was like fascinated by it. Someone forwarded it to me, and I wanted to give you a shout out after reading 3-4 times that hey, this is interesting. I love your content, and I think everyone should subscribe to your content. But coming back, how did you even start your own shop in ProcureTech? What was your background that led you to start this?
Sure. So origin story. I did a bachelor's degree in business and IT, and at the end, I also did we have a case study competition in Quebec called the Commerce Games, right? And so I participated in IT there as well. And so it was a pressure cooker where you had 3 hours to read a case study, prepare a presentation, a solution, and a presentation, and then present it to a panel. And it was in teams of 3, right? So it very much mimicked, to me, what consulting was like. And so went out into consulting, thriving off that pressure and that model of coming up with solutions to tough problems quickly, at least creative ideas, right? And started IBM Canada in the SAP practice. So I started implementing SAP MM with clients in and around Montreal and the Quebec area. So did some pulp and paper, Cirque du Soleil. So I was going to say the circus industry, but there's not that many in there, right? Aerospace, mining, public sector. And when SAP acquired Ariba in 2012, at IBM, I built up the practice to implement Ariba as well. So we did some Ariba sourcing, Ariba contract management, supplier lifecycle and performance. And so I was always trying to build my expertise around the full procurement value chain, right? Do a spend analysis project and understand the whole picture of what I need as a procurement organization to be able to deliver value. And eventually I was managing that practice. We were about a team of 15, 20 people. And my daughter was born, so about 5 years ago. And for me, I wanted to keep answering that question for CPOs, like what's the best tech stack to get me to my business objectives. But I also wanted to widen the lens of solutions, right, or the tools in my tool belt. And ProcureTech was just beginning to explode, right? And I think today we're above 430 documented solutions in the space by procurement software.sites count. I love what James Meads is doing over there. So check that out if you don't know about it. And yeah, so I wanted to be able to talk to all these other solution providers, yourself included, right, around what they're doing, what's happening, how do we fit the pieces together. And so that's how the newsletter came about as well. And it's really, really deep, really niche topic, right, around how do we use technology to best serve our procurement organizations. And so in the last 5 years, went out on my own, kind of have the entrepreneurial spirit as you do, I'm sure, as well, to be able to build the brand, but also deliver mandates. And I really like the fact that everything started and stopped with me, right? So everything was my fault, whether it was good or bad. Extreme accountability, and yeah. And in the meantime, it's been about, okay, I realize I now have this baggage of knowledge that's very niche and very specific, but also very valuable. So how can I push that out to the world with LinkedIn, with the newsletter, so that ultimately the mission is how do I help procurement level up with technology, being only one guy, because that's the the work model that suits me best.
When you started off, how many ProcureTech companies did you come across? And I remember you talking about Ariba. And today you see the landscape. How have you seen it evolve? And I have a follow-up after this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts,
Sure.
because I was just looking at a report. Marketing technology, marketing SaaS companies, there are almost 15,000 globally. And ProcureTech, I think somewhere between 400, 500.
Yeah.
And they are also like, so many have evolved in the last couple of years. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think it's useful to have like a basic framework to approach the market. And for me, I break it down into 4 categories. It used to be 3, but now I say 4 because you'll know in a second why. So there's the ERP systems, your legacy SAP, JD Edwards, Bond, Oracle systems, right? And yes, they are improving those systems. So you see S4 or the S4 systems for SAP, the new generation ERPs. Oracle is always coming out with their new versions as well. So, there's that piece, and we're not going to get away from it, especially from the P2P side of things, especially in the manufacturing or direct purchasing side of things, right? So I think that's there to stay. But then source to pay, the second category is like the suites came on the market, the Aribas, the Coupas, the GEPs, the iValuas, the Zycuses, to say we'll be your one-stop shop for everything the ERP cannot do, right? So we'll give you spend analysis, sourcing modules, contracting modules, which you can't do in ERP, but we'll also give you the buying piece, right? So the procure to pay, requisitioning, approvals, receipts, invoice management, and supplier relationship management modules, and you'll be able to do everything in that suite. And then if you can't, or if you don't want to, you can also do the P2P in your ERP, right? So I always think about, like, if you're a big shop, enterprise, you have your ERP there, and you build on top of that with your suite. But what we also realized in the last 5 years is the suite, you're fighting the fight on too many fronts from a solution provider perspective, right? It's hard to follow innovation and innovate on the whole procurement value chain as quickly as the third category, which is your best of breed solutions, right? Which I think I would put you, Procol, in that category, right? So best of breed solutions, they go, hey, we're going to focus on a tiny sliver, or one of the functional areas like contract management or sourcing, and we're going to deliver the best possible experience and solution in that space. And we're going to make our solution open and partner with sort of pay suites, with ERPs, with other best of breed solutions, to be able to fit into the enterprise architecture as best as possible, while giving that amount of value that's very specific to that sliver, right? So what we're seeing is the sorts of pay suites partnering or acquiring like some of these best of breed to plug the holes in their solutions. And so that's very interesting, and I think that's why we're seeing that best of breed layer really pop up, right? And stimulate innovation, stimulate us to getting to the next level. And then the fourth category, it's sort of a best of breed solution, but I call it like the process orchestration layer, right? And I used to refer to it as in the best of breed layer, but I've kind of put it apart, because to me, yes, it's specific to procurement, but it's also like a concept that you could apply to any other functional area, which is you have business processes, you have inputs and outputs, you have systems that are there to help you guide and facilitate the process, you have policies that you're trying to implement, and we didn't have a good way to do that end to end, right? Through this patchwork of systems, of ERPs, best of breeds, and source to pay suites, to thread the needle, so to speak, right? So I see those other applications as being patches in a quilt you want to make, but then you're not able to join everything together, or you have to do it, piece by piece, sew everything together, whereas process orchestration gives you like a backing, and then you could just put your patches on it where they need to be in that process, right? So that's the fourth category, and so that's the framework I sort of use with potential clients, and even just educating folks on how to think about ProcureTech. Is like, you're going to have a functional breakdown of your function, and then you need to think about the pieces and where they're going to fit in those 4 categories, and why, and the budgets you have, the constraints you have, the legacy debt, technology debt that you have, and that exercise of taking that framework and making it fit in the context of your organization is most of the work I do with clients, and the thinking I do with the newsletter.
Extremely well put framework, I should say that, Joel, because all of these categories are quite distinct and easily positioned so that the customers can understand them well. In fact, in our personal experience, we've spoken to 1,000 procurement teams so far today, till date,
Okay,
and
cool.
it's always been positioning is very difficult for them to understand which category do they want to do the digital transformation of the procurement in. Eventually, we come in sourcing, source to contract, and other areas, but we do find customers struggling to find or even pinpointing the right solution first. So, how do you, even when you have these four categories, how do you go about helping them evaluate these solutions better so that it can add value to their business outcomes and
Yeah,
then link the technology to that outcome? How do you help them do this?
I
Evaluate
think
the
that
right.
I would just say the first thing, right? You put your finger on it. Like as a ProcureTech provider, that's part of the challenge is you need to educate your clients on the market and where you fit into it, and why that's, why it's important to them. But to answer your question more directly on that second piece, it's like, where you want to start, to me, where you have the most pain and or opportunity, right? So pain usually motivates and drives people more than potential benefit, right? So it's like, where do you have a lot of pain? So is it in the requisition to PO cycle time? Is it in the quality of your inputs? Is it in being able to manage risk, and you're getting hit left and right by things that you don't see coming? Is it supplier onboarding and not having the data for your suppliers to be able to execute on business outcomes? So that's why I always come back to, okay, before we talk about tech, right? What's the business objectives, the wider business objectives? How does that feed into your procurement function objectives? Is it savings? Is it diversity? Is it innovation? Is it risk management? Is it all these other things that we can pull levers on as procurement? So what are your procurement function objectives? What capabilities do you need to achieve those objectives, right? So I need to be able to run 60 sourcing events a year with 4 category managers, right? Or like, what do those capabilities look like? And usually I formulate those as, I want to have the ability to do X in business language. And then when we have those capabilities, then we're able to say, okay, well, those capabilities, based on the framework I just told you, they map in sourcing, or they map to contract management or P2P. And so we should be looking at technologies that will allow you to develop those capabilities within the framework I just outlined with you. So that's sort of how I think about it.
This is really cool, actually. And I think everyone should adopt this, because I don't think people learn. And your framework on job, we call it in product management, jobs to be done framework,
Yeah.
JTPD.
Yeah.
And so that's what you referred. You want to understand the capabilities on what do I want to achieve. I want to do X with X, right, or with Y. So yeah, love the framework that you have in mind. With so many tools, and now you've probably seen so many companies adopt them. What is the number one challenge in adopting or managing the change to drive that outcome that you've seen?
Making it easier than the alternative Maverick buying or Maverick process, right? So like, to me, change management, yes, you have to like, it's a 5-step framework that I lean heavily on ProSci and the ADKAR framework. Are you familiar with that?
No, I
So
would love to.
ADKAR is an acronym, right? But it stands for five things: awareness, desire. So awareness of the change, desire to change, the knowledge to be able to do the change, the abilities to be able to do the change, and then reinforcement of that change over time. And to me, whatever change you're doing, if it's a system, it's a new process, you're moving buildings, right? Like you're taking somebody physically from their office here and you want them to start working physically somewhere else, they need to go through those 5 steps, right? And some of them might be very quick, some of them might be very long, depending on the complexity of the change, right? And so I don't think we think about change management that way, right? We just say, oh, we need to send an email, send a communication, people will need to attend the training, but it's a life cycle, right? That they need to go through to get to the other end, outside of the other end. But that being said, I think that the way to make that process as simple as possible and as easy and effortless as possible is that the solutions that you deploy need to be easier than the alternative, right? And the alternative is not the system you had before, or the manual process you had before, but it's that person's alternative to satisfying their requirement, right? So if I'm, for example, if I'm a requester, let's talk intake management, because that's where we have the most adoption adoption issues, right? For with our requesters today, they're sending you a rec where it says, "I need a fridge," right? Like we need a fridge in the office. Like send the requisition, or I need to repave the parking lot. We need to get the lobby painted, and there's no context. We need to phone them back, right? Or they don't even send you a rec. They just call the suppliers directly and get them to come and then send you a non-PO invoice at the end of the process, right? So what's better than that is like, if we look at Gen AI and being able to have like the concierge, right? That's plugged into the purchasing systems in the back. If I'm able to say, you're already in Teams, you're already in email, like just chat with the concierge, right? And it will ask you questions to help shape your requirement, right? So I want to get the lobby painted. Okay, how many square feet? How high are the ceilings? Like all these questions that you could easily imagine going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, ChatGPT, like I want to get my garage painted at home. Like what information do I need to provide to get a good quote? We do the same thing, right? But with a purpose-built procurement AI engine or AI assistant, and we pull that into the rec and into the procurement process automatically, right? And that's easier than them contacting the suppliers directly, right? So to me, that concrete example is how you need to think about change management. Like, how am I providing a better experience that's going to drive compliance with my strategies and my business objectives, that's going to translate to value and dollars and bottom line impacts?
Again, great framework for. How did you come up with these frameworks?
Lots of trial and error, experience writing. That's the beauty of forcing yourself to write a blog every week, is you need to come up with something, right? So sometimes you come up with stuff that's less valuable, but over time you refine your thinking. So I don't pretend to have the best solution yet, and I'm sure it'll continue to evolve, which is also another thing, is to not, once you have a framework, once you have a way to think, like, don't stop there, right? Don't say like, oh, keep iterating on it, keep challenging it. And so I would say it's that feedback loop of putting ideas out into the world. People challenge them, you take that in, you go, okay, is that a good challenge? Is that a bad challenge? And you apply critical thinking and you do it all over again, right?
I think what you touched upon is ability to change. I think that is a lot characteristic within companies. I've seen companies with some entrepreneurial talent is able to drive the change faster and better than other companies. In fact, yesterday I was talking to a large Series C tech company, raised hundreds of millions, and they don't have a procurement team, and the security team actually implemented a intake tool all by themselves. That was so and they have to run the intake because yeah because the third party risk comes under them, and so they are like, we need an intake tool before anyone else does. So we need to sort this for ourselves. And so this guy took the initiative to solve the company's problem. And I asked him, coming from cybersecurity background, how was he able to do this? And he just said, I read 5-6 books, read some blogs. There's so much information about intake. And so I was like surprised, like, okay, now this is becoming too mainstream, which is incredible.
And there's to your point, like, not just for procurement in general, like we've never had as much freely available knowledge out there, right? We've never had as much noise either, but like that's the whole, like when we say continuous learning, like, when you listen to the Warren Buffett speeches and the Tesla Elon Musk speeches, and it's all about learning. Well, that's what it means concretely, right? Is like, go out there, read something, read something else, contrast and compare, and then make your own idea about it, and then do it all over again, and do that forever, and you'll get to a better understanding of the world and better results as an output as well.
Yeah, and I believe every company has that single one champion or an entrepreneur who drives this change.
An intrapreneur, right?
Oh yeah, well put.
Do you have any at Procol? I'm flipping the script here. I want you, like, do you have pockets of innovation where they come to you with, I don't know, new functionality, new things, and you go like, I didn't even think of that, right?
All day long. So we do at least 30 customer calls on product front every 2 weeks, I believe. And to do that, every time we go on a customer call, they'll tell us, look, these are the things we want. But these are the customers who basically digitized some bits of their process to begin with, right? They're all companies which are mid to large. We work with typically 200-300 million to $2-3 billion in revenue companies. And typically what we find with them is everyone is focused on first getting to some place so that they can prove internally that this works, build more credibility as a champion, and then implement more tools along with it. So we have seen these internal champions becoming even better as they see initial success. And every new product release just makes them better, happy, and I think we have a great customer satisfaction score over 9.2 or something, and
Okay,
this
cool.
this just
On
gives us
10, right? Just to be
yeah.
clear.
CSAT is measured on 10, so
Okay, good. It's not on 100 or something.
yeah. That's fine. Anyway, coming back, I think lastly, I would love for you to talk a bit about what the future of procurement tech holds. Like from your vantage point, what do you see in the next 1 to 3 years? What's going to happen? And
I don't know. I think the future is here in the sense where like we have all the technology and all the tools as far as I'm concerned. Like I'm sure others will continue to pop up, but we have all the concepts, the frameworks to apply them in our businesses, right? Like just rolling out what we know now in our businesses is going to take in global enterprise, because that's the space I mainly play in, is going to take 3 to 5 years, right? And so I think the near-term future is already decided. Like we see process orchestration playing a big picture, tying everything together, giving people a good user experience so that you get those business outcomes that you want, right? Like we don't need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And more openness, more partnerships between the players that remain in the ecosystem, right? So I think we're going to see a lot more M&A among ProcureTech, like more venture capital investment as well, and consolidation and opening of the solutions, right? So you can't afford to be a closed solution where the data is trapped within your solution in today's ecosystem, at least not from my perspective. And if you are and you get to capture a bit of market share, like that may happen, but eventually people are going to get fed up and clue into the fact that they need open applications, and will transfer over to those, right? And I mean, that's also already here in the sense where I just see like a higher volume of partnerships, a higher volume of click and point and install integrations with other tools. So I think that's the future, right? Is realizing the promise of things we've been working on as an industry for 10, 20 years, right? We keep beating the same drum, I find. And then also, AI is in there. But what I don't like about Gen AI is the huge energy costs in the background, right? Like that's going to be something that just not for procurement, but in Gen AI in general, we're going to have to solve. And I see the winners of Gen AI long-term being the ones that can provide the best tailored experience with a very tailored model with the lowest size and performance energy requirements for that model to give the desired income, right? So yeah, right now we're in the era of like the Walmart of Gen AI, where like use ChatGPT, it's the hugest model, it's got all these parameters, but that has a huge cost, right? And so if I'm able to get niche LLM models, niche Gen AI models, I think that's the future on that front. And then how do we bring that into ProcureTech will be interesting as well, right? But
sure.
no, I mean, it's always the same messages, always the same things we're trying to do, right?
Yeah. What is number one advice that when you talk to your customers or procurement professionals is you find yourself giving them?
Start slow, start small. I'd call it the snowball concept, right? So like take a small team of entrepreneurs, right? Or go find them, or even with a solution provider, because I'm sure you're doing a lot of consulting work on, as a result of wanting to come and implement the tech, and work on a roadmap, right? A high level picture that doesn't have to be very, very granular, but, based on, for example, the 4 categories I mentioned and your different slices of your procurement process, like, what are the big pieces? Why do you prioritize them? And then just start executing on that, right? But don't go big bang, or don't go like this huge deployment, right? You want to start small. I like the concept of small bets, right? Like that's, I think it's, forget the name of the author, but there's a book called Thinking in Bets, which is pretty useful for that, right? It's like let's invest continuously in these small bets, right? And thinking, validating that our roadmap and our assumptions are correct. And let's do it with the smallest amount of users and the smallest scope possible. And once we do validate that concept, it's very much like a proof of concept framework, but potentially even smaller, right? And then deploy it small, small, and then you'll see the snowball start to build and momentum gain itself. The change management happens faster, and you've got business units that come to like, hey, I want to use your intake management. Like, why haven't you deployed it to our business unit yet, right? Instead of deploying too quickly, too big, having all these backlog of tickets to do while you're trying to deploy the solution in parallel. So make sure you get it right at a small scope, and then open up the, go all in on your small bet.
Well said. That's all from us today, Joel. Thanks for taking the time for answering all our questions humbly and patiently. Appreciate all your inputs and insights. I would recommend all the audience and listeners to this podcast to go and subscribe to Pure Procurement, a newsletter that you publish every week. I love reading it, and I recommend it to everyone else to read it as well. Thanks again for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Gaurav. It's a pleasure to be here, and I had a lot of fun. As I told you, you can just push me in a direction. I'll just keep talking until you stop me. So it's always fun to do that. Thanks for having me.
Love it. Thank you.